The Detroit Pistons have hired Fred Vinson to join their coaching staff for this upcoming season. We are joined by our friend Czar to talk about this move and the other offseason stuff as far as draft, free agency. We'll get his thoughts on all that in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. So we have a little bit of news to talk about on this podcast. I want you guys to be prepared for what I've been, being around the bush with this, but since this news came out, I'm just going to go ahead and it is what it is. I'm going to let it go for a minute. We are joined by our friend Czar. You guys can obviously follow him on Twitter with the name on the screen. You guys know he does work over at Bully Ball as well. Friend of the podcast. Happy to have him on. We are going to talk about the Pistons hiring Fred Vinson. They have stolen him from the New Orleans Pelicans. Fred Vinson obviously is one of the, if you know anything about the NBA, if you've been keeping up, he is one of the best shooting coaches in the world. He has been attributed to helping a lot of really good players in their jump shots, with their outside shots. So this is a big time hire to get him from New Orleans to come with Trajan to the Pistons. So that in of itself is a good hire. However, I have to go into this. I want to take this time to say this real quickly. If this, obviously, the tweet that we got from Woj made it seem like that he is joining Monty Williams' coaching staff, which we've had James and Omari come out and they've said this doesn't mean for sure that Monty's coming back, but it is interesting wording for what it is. So at the time of us recording this is 4:13 p.m. on June 14th. I want to say this right now. The Pistons should not return Monty Williams. Monty Williams should not be coming back. I want to make this clear as well. It's pretty obvious based on reports that if Monty comes back, this is Trajan's call. This is not Tom's call. So with that said, I think Tom Gores, if that's how it's going, if this is where it seems to be leading, not for sure anything, but this is where it's leading, I know that Tom, just a few weeks ago, I know there were reports that they wanted to give the president of basketball operations leeway to make this decision. If that's where they're leading and that's where they're going to end up going, Tom needs to step in. Tom and his people, Tom and Arn Tellem, Tom and all the rest of the guys, Dwayne Casey, anyone else in the front office that's still there, they were the ones who witnessed what happened last year with Monty. They went through last year with Monty Williams. They went through that last year. Trajan did not. Tom watched everything that happened last year with Monty Williams. He saw all the intricacies of everything. Tom had to fly out to Detroit to have a meeting with Monty Williams to get him to play Jaden Ivey over Killian Hayes. That happened. Trajan wasn't here for that. Tom was. Tom and his people were. How many? If this is where they're going, Tom needs to step in and make this call himself. I know that goes against what was said a few weeks ago. But I think at that time, a lot of people seemed to believe that the decision was going to be that Monty left. If they are leaning towards bringing him back, Tom needs to step in. And my next point with it is, if there is any chance that Monty Williams, and I'm sorry, Czar knew this was coming. He was cool with this happening. But if there is any chance that Monty Williams is just going to be fired midseason or fired next offseason, fire him now. There is no point in waiting till next year or this midseason. The time right now is perfect. There are some assistants. There are some available candidates that are high on a lot of people's list that people are fans of. There are some assistants. There are some candidates that have connections to certain people within the Pistons organization. This is a good time to do it if you are going to do it. If you are just holding on to Monty to make the move next offseason or midseason, you are essentially making the excuse that this season will not matter if it goes wrong because, you didn't have your coach. oh, this guy wasn't our guy anyways, we had to go get our guy. You are essentially punting on this season if that was the route, if you're planning on just doing it later on. And how do you think that's going to play out for people that matter in this organization? How do you think that's going to play out to the fan base if that's what you end up doing? How do you think that's going to play out to certain players? And how many people, I think people within the organization may or may not know or have a better idea than maybe I do. I'm not going to sit here and say I know everything. I'm sure they have a better idea on a lot of this stuff. How many people are actually fans of Monty Williams at this point? So if you are not bringing back Monty Williams because you think he is going to be the future head coach for the rest of his contract, because he wasn't given a contract to just be the coach of the 2024-2025 season. He was given this contract because they thought he could be the coach of the future. If you have not come to the conclusion that he is going to be the coach for the next 5 years, like his contract says, and this is just going to be a trial year where you blame what happens this year if it goes south on that, and now this was basically an excuse of a year, like we just witnessed this past year, Tom Gores, please step in and make the decision for everybody. Make the decision now. You know what, we saw what happened this past year. You witnessed the longest losing streak in NBA history in a single season with Monty Williams. You had to fly out from California to talk to him about Jaden Ivey. He lied to the press, to the beat multiple times about reducing the rotation. Like, we don't need to go through everything. You guys lived through that last year. Trajan did not. You guys lived through all of that this past year. If that's where they're leaning, please, Tom, I'm going to come on here and say Tom Gores should step in. That's what I believe. I think that's what a lot of people seem to believe. Monty should not return next year. There is no basketball reason based off last year that he should return. It was the worst season in Pistons history. Vincent is a great hire. Let him be the shooting coach. Keep him. Give him a good contract. Doesn't mean Monty has to be the head coach. That's it. That's it, Czar. You all right?
I'm good. I'm good. I feel like like when you feel like something's gonna get clipped on Twitter. I kept making sure. I was like, okay, does my hair look good? You know what I mean? Like when this.
Hopefully it does. Hopefully it does get clipped on Twitter. But
no. That was good. I can't understand anything besides a resume being the reason why, because like it didn't really seem like he connected really with a lot of the players on the team. Like I watched very closely.
I'll jump in real quick and say also
go ahead.
Relationships with there's questions about the relationships with the players. How much I think there's questions to just how many relationships did he build in totality at all?
I mean, that's completely fair. I mean, from what I know, not many, right? And it's interesting just from a pure basketball perspective, kind of watching someone who's like his protege in Jamil McMillan, right? He was the head coach of the Motor City Cruise this last year. The Cruise were like, I think, finished 1 or 2 games out of the playoffs, but they had a really good season despite like Jonte Porter getting poached, and then that was a whole nother thing. They had a good season, and something I noticed a lot was the players would come directly to Jamil McMillan for advice in games during practices. Like it was one of the things, like if they won, it felt like they all won. The coaching staff was all really close with the players and vice versa. And also being up close and personal with the Pistons this year, it was like night and day. Even I remember Casey's first year, because like initially that was something I was looking at as far as expectations, was Casey's first year in Detroit, which was 2018-19, that Blake year, never forget. And then Monty's first year. I thought those were going to be a little closer than they were. It was complete polar opposites, as we know. But I remember specifically, like there was that Toronto game, Casey's first year, where they beat Toronto on that buzzer beater, Reggie Bullock, and like Casey's like celebrating, the players like hugging him and everything like that. I can't recall a single moment this entire season where there was anything remotely close to that. Now, if Monty Williams returns, I have to believe they have something in place where they're like, hey, Monty, like you got to put the work in this year. We have to see things, not just in terms of wins and losses, because that's obviously a huge thing, but I want to see players' confidence not dipping to like where they're just throwing up random shots or they're scared to take shots, things like that. I want to see players, bonding with each other instead of playing for themselves. Those types of things are all things I really hope to see if Monty returns, because if not, then I completely agree with what you said.
Well, we're going to wrap the segment up because I don't want to go too far into it. I said what I had to say. And then we'll come right back and we'll talk about Fred Vinson, which is the news of the day. I'll simply say this one more time. Worst season in Pistons history. We all, Tom, Arn, you witnessed what happened this past year. Again, Trajan did not. Everyone within the Pistons organization, all the players, the fans, everyone witnessed this past season. And if I'll simply say this, if everyone loved how he handled this past season, it wouldn't be June 14th and it'd still be up in the air. That it would not be the case. If he had developed relationships with key people, with anyone, if this was a great season, if he had done a great job this past season, a good enough job this past season, to where he had, you know what, I don't want to go. I'm going. You know what, I gotta cut it off there. It's Tom, Arn. I understand whoever else, Dwayne, whoever else is involved, but Tom, you at the top. You had to fly to Detroit to get him to play Jaden Ivey more than Killian Hayes. Killian Hayes is no longer in the NBA. Unless Monty Williams has convinced you and Trajan that he is the coach for the next 5 years of his contract, then okay, I'm wrong, and you know what, do your thing. But if that is not what's happening, do not waste this year of Cade's career. Don't do it, please. Don't waste this career of potentially Ivy or Duran or anyone. Don't waste this year of Pistons fans. How about that? Don't waste this year of the Pistons community and anyone within that's associated with the Pistons this year if that's not what it is. If it's just going to be him getting fired midseason or next year. Just don't do that. Just please step in. We'll wrap it up. When we come back, we'll talk about Fred Vinson joining the Pistons, which is a great hire. Great hire by Trajan to get him to come to Detroit. We'll talk about that when we come back. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It is the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more players' stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. With PrizePicks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make a PrizePicks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. You just need to pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you locked in right there. When the finals are over, the hoops action doesn't stop on PrizePicks. Women's basketball is just getting started with young stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese looking to make names for themselves alongside the great of Brianna Stewart and Asia Wilson. You can win up to 100 times your cash while watching them ball out. And for June only, there's always action on PrizePicks, and this is always the perfect time to try out something new as basketball is winding down. Make sure to try out esports this month because every Wednesday and Saturday in June, if your lineup doesn't win, you'll get entry fee back. Choose from Counter-Strike 2, Call of Duty, League of Legends, and more. I absolutely love PrizePicks. You guys definitely need to go check it out. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with PrizePicks. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on our podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So I spent a lot of the, fun first segment, right? So I'll go ahead and just I'll give a very quick just who Fred Vinson is, and I'm gonna give you a lot of time because we know what just happened. So Fred Vinson, he is one of the best shooting coaches in the entire world. He's worked with many NBA players. I think one of the most notable recent ones was Lonzo on his jump shot, but he has worked with Herb Jones, obviously with New Orleans. He's been the assistant coach there for a long time, but he's worked with players throughout the NBA. He is one of the best shooting coaches we've seen. I'm sure some people would consider him the best shooting coach in the NBA. So he joins the Pistons staff. He comes over with Trajan, who I'm assuming obviously he's really close with. He joins the Pistons. That is big news. Czar, go ahead, take it from there. How do you feel about this hiring? What was your reaction when you saw this?
First reaction, didn't really have to do with
Right,
Fred,
right,
even
right.
though, so I've come to know that he's a great coach. He's really well respected across the league. And I think one thing that's really interesting about this hire is that it almost is like, it's a little bit telling because a lot of the prospects in this draft are not great shooters outside of like your Dalton Connects. You can look at Risa Shea. He's a pretty good shooter, but like where the Pistons are drafting, there's not a lot of great shooters. So it makes you wonder who they're considering and if they maybe already have somebody in mind when it comes to developing their shot. I look at Ron Holland as an example. He's someone who is like feels like he's a jump shot away. Like there's a lot of players who are, they're a jump shot away, but genuinely Ron Holland has all the tools. He really just needs a jump shot. And then I'm also looking at Matas Buzelis. He also had shot pretty well in high school, but in the G League, his shooting numbers plummeted a lot. So I'm sure they would like to get that back onto a better trajectory than where it was. And then even on the Pistons right now, regardless of who stays, who goes, we and I kind of know a lot of the same things. So let's be real. Cade, Asar are two of your main young guys, right? And then you have Stu. And Stu is already making a whole bunch of leaps with his shooting. His percentages jumped a whole lot this year. And I'm sure that's been really encouraging for the organization as a whole. He's coming into the first year of his extension. That shooting could continue to increase. And then you could look at someone like Asar, who, although he isn't a good shooter, he shows the willingness to shoot, which is a good sign. He didn't shoot great from the free throw line either, but the fact that he's willing to shoot gives you something to work with. And I think this is something to watch in terms of the players' shooting developments. I think Cade even would be someone to watch, because I know Brandon Ingram, when he came to New Orleans, where he started versus where he is now are night and day, right? And then even Lonzo Ball. I remember I was always a big Lonzo Ball guy. I don't know why. It might have just been the Facebook stuff. I don't know. I always just liked how he played.
I mean, the Ball family, it was like, at least I know I'm a little bit older than you, but like the whole Ball family, Lonzo, LaMelo. I remember watching LaMelo pull up from half court and that being like the big thing going throughout the high school. I remember Lonzo dunking on people and then helping them up, being a gentleman about that was going all throughout high school back in the day.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting you mentioned that, because LaMelo stayed in Macomb, where I'm at, a whole bunch during my high school experience. So like, I feel like most of my friends have a LaMelo story, but that's neither here nor there. Lonzo, his shooting development from Los Angeles to leaving New Orleans, and I know it's kind of a sad story because he hasn't played in a while, but in Chicago, you really saw a leap in shooting, and towards his end of his New Orleans runs, you saw a leap in shooting. And I'm sure if he had gotten more time to work with him, someone like Dyson Daniels would have been someone to watch, because he's someone who didn't have a great shot, but they're starting to make some progress. So I think it's really, really, really encouraging for a team that really struggles with shooting to hire one of the best shooting coaches in the NBA.
Yeah, and one of the names you didn't mention, but Herb Jones. I mean, he's someone who came into the league, didn't have a great shot, and he shot 41, nearly 42% this past year. Not in crazy volume, but 42% this past year. You mentioned Brandon Ingram. We had the Locked On Pelicans host Jake Madison on the podcast and talked about Brandon Ingram. When he first joined New Orleans, it was great because look at this. He shot 33% his final year in LA, only on 1.8 attempts. His first 2 years, and if he can get back to that, I mean, we talked about with Jake, if he could get back to what he was doing the first 2 years in New Orleans, then I think he would fit absolutely fantastic next to Cade, but neither here nor there. His first 2 years in New Orleans, by far the most threes he's ever taken, 6.2, 6.1, and he shot 39% and 38% on those shots. Now, he just stopped shooting threes after that. I don't know what happened. That's part of the reason why things are going a little bit south in New Orleans. But that another example of someone who worked with Fred Vinson, who had great success. He is one. I'm not exaggerating at all. Look up Fred Vinson. Look at YouTube clips. There are YouTube videos of players talking about Fred Vinson, how much he's helped them. He is one of the best shooting coaches in the NBA. There's countless examples. And again, like I said earlier, some may think he is the best one. But I think what makes this even more interesting outside of I do think it makes it interesting with Matas and Ron Holland and potential draft picks. But what I think makes it more interesting is Jaden Ivey and Asar Thompson. I think that's where I think that's where my mind. Well, that's not where my mind first went. You guys heard where my mind first went, but where my mind went immediately after was, okay. First of all, getting him is like, that was a crazy get by Trajan. And does that mean that they are showing a level of belief in Asar Thompson and Jaden Ivey? Because this young core, what is going to stop this young core from having any chance of succeeding is the fact they can't shoot. The only one who took a real jump in shooting is Cade. And we talked about that last episode, how he shot 50.5% on pull-up twos, how he shot 36.1% on pull-up threes at the last 51 games of the year, shot 36% for three on the year, 37.3% on catch and shoot threes. Yes, I remember all these stats off the top of my head. He shot really well this past year. He took that jump that we expected to see out of college. So Cade's the one that did. Duren can't shoot. Asar can't shoot. Jaden Ivey was in, I think I had the 13th percentile, I believe, according to Synergy. I should have had it up, but 13th around there. Percentile on catch and shoot looks, did not shoot well from this year from mid-range or from long range. Also not a great free throw shooter either. Like, that's what's going to stop this team from being able to build really around more than two of them. Like, that's what's going to stop them. So I think this was a sign of, at least, this is speculation, but maybe they believe, maybe Trajan really likes what they have in Asar, in Duren, in Ivy, in some of their other skill sets that they have. And he recognizes, obviously, okay, if I can get their shot to come along, I really like what I have here. And maybe this is a sign of they're not going to trade an Ivy. And I think to a lesser extent, like you mentioned, we've heard that Asar and Cade are really the guys they look highly of. And maybe Trajan feels different, who knows? But I mean, that's what I've heard for months, is that Cade and Asar, those are the main guys that they really like. Maybe they don't want to move off of Ivy. Maybe they don't want to move off of Duren. Maybe they truly believe if they can get a year working with, an offseason working with Fred Vinson, and not just them, obviously the rest of the roster as well, and potential draft picks, but really those guys, if they can get some improvement from Asar and Ivy, now all of a sudden the topic of how you have to construct this roster completely changes. If you're able to get three of those four guys to shoot the ball respectively, not 32, 33%, where you can get them to be respected and actually have gravity. That, I think, that was where my mind went. So I don't know if this completely takes off the possibility of one of them getting traded, but I don't see how anyone's mind wouldn't go to saying maybe this is a sign of confidence in their ability to get there and their willingness to see it, how it goes this year.
I also got to think, because obviously everything's up in the air with the roster, right? Someone like Quentin Grimes didn't initially come to mind, but as we were talking, I was like, oh, Quentin Grimes, because he is someone who was known as a 3-and-D player and was seen as a pretty high-level 3-and-D player, but obviously this year he struggled with injuries, and then last year in New York didn't really play up to his usual standard. If he can get to where maybe a Herb Jones was, that's such a huge win for Detroit as well. So I really think regardless of who stays, who goes, pretty much everybody wins.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I've seen even some people, I'm not going to go this far, but I've even seen some fans say, if you're getting Fred Vinson out and the cost is Monty staying, then so be it. I'm not going to go that far, but that should give you guys an idea of just how, like, I'm not exaggerating at all when I say how much of a great pull this was by Trajan to get Vinson here in Detroit. Absolute incredible get. And I've had already a lot of you guys send me DMs and comment saying, "Koo, I'm sure you're going to record about this, but does this change your willingness to move on from Ivy or willingness to blow up the roster?" I don't know if just hiring him himself makes me move completely off that take. I will say that if they don't go that route, it does make me feel better about going the other route. That is 100%. If they decide to just keep those guys and kind of give them another year to develop their shot, I still probably lean towards trying to really add win now pieces and seeing what their value is. But if they don't go that route, I feel a lot better about them not going that route with Fred Vinson around. 100%. Absolutely. Is there anything else you want to hit on, Czar, before we move on?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think one thing as far as expectations is, like, I obviously don't expect like a jump day one, right? But I think it's something to watch as the season progresses. But it does make me think, like, I hope it doesn't become a thing of, oh, we have the shooting coach, so it doesn't really matter, like roster construction and everything like that. I still hope they prioritize spacing and shooting this summer when it comes to who they get, who they sign, who they trade for, etc. But I do expect one of the players we mentioned to have a pretty significant jump by the end of this coming season in terms of shooting.
I mean, look, everyone knows I'm a SAR guy. If Asar gets a jump shot, dog, like damn near unstoppable. If he gets a jump shot, he's going to be insane if he gets a jump shot.
What's his ceiling in your eyes then?
I don't want to say what I think his ceiling could be if he gets a jump shot because
Okay.
I mean, this is the same. I was very high in both him and his brother, like so high to where I had them like top 4 prospects in the draft. Like if they get a jump, either one of them, if Asar gets a jump shot,
GG's.
like you can't teach that type of athleticism, that type of feel. Already like an all-NBA defender type of guy, passing, finishing. Now you have a jumper too. Like Fred Vinson might be like the saving grace, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the draft with Czar. So stay tuned for that. I know you guys have been loving some of the draft stuff. You guys want me to get even deeper into the draft stuff. As I've told you guys, I'm working on it. Really busy guy. Work has been killing me, but we're trying to get it out. So we'll talk a little bit more about the draft when we come back. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is so easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier for you. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. That's why 2.5 million small businesses are using LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. That's with linkedinjobs.com. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe on the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review or whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So Czar, the Pistons, obviously they have the 5th overall pick in this upcoming draft. Are they going to keep it? Are they going to move it? We haven't really heard anything about it. They obviously just got a president of basketball operations, and the head coaching stuff, the coaching staff, like that all is still up in there. Who knows? So we haven't really heard anything about trades or the draft at all, really, with the Pistons. So I know you look into some of the draft stuff. What are you feeling about this draft right now for the Detroit Pistons as of June 14th, 4:39 p.m.?
So I'm not going to lie. Like going into this offseason, my knowledge about the draft was like that much. Like it was just a thing of like the season was so heavy to witness that even because I tried to be objective, right? This season, it's no secret, right? I grew up a Pistons fan. It was a lot easier this year, I'll say that. But anyway, it takes a toll on your love for the sport of basketball, you know? So I just needed to take a little break before I got back into like deep diving into basketball and hoops and everything like that. And in my process, I have to say my favorite pick for the Pistons, and I guess I have a video / article coming out soon on Bully Ball. I'll spoil it a little bit. My favorite prospect for the Pistons right now is Donovan Clingan. Now, do I think he's going to be available at 5? Unsure. I don't really know yet. It's just because there's been a lot of talk of him going maybe top 3. I've heard Atlanta might like him even at 1. So there's a lot of different things that are playing into this draft, and it's a draft where like anybody could really go anywhere. Even Alexander Sarr, like obviously I don't see him falling past like 2, but he's still not a guarantee to even be a number 1 overall pick. So it's become really interesting. I think the Pistons, if they have the opportunity to draft Donovan Clingan, I think he solves so many issues. And I don't think you necessarily have to trade Jalen Duren as a result, but he does give you everything that Jalen Duren doesn't in terms of defensive presence. I have a nickname for him with some of my friends, and I call him Mayo Gobert. Just be
Is that because they call like? Is that? I get why you say it, but like where my head went was because don't they call Gobert like Bouquet or like what is it they call him? Baguette or?
The big baguette. Is that what they call him?
They call him something like that. So
Mayo Gobert. I think he would be such a good fit for the Pistons at 5 because I know they're looking at Nick Claxton. James reported that. I know they're looking at Isaiah Hartenstein, and both of those guys are better defenders than Duren right now. But I don't think they have the ceiling as a defensive prospect that Donovan Clingan does. I truly think he projects to be one of the best rim protectors in the NBA. Now, will he be as good as someone like Victor Wembanyama? No, just because Victor has that size advantage that quite literally no one else in the league has. But if you look at a Walker Kessler, a Rudy Gobert, even a Daniel Gafford, who's become a pretty good rim protector in his career, those are all guys that I kind of put Donovan Clingan in the same tier as, because I think he has such great defensive feel, and he's going to be good. Like, I feel pretty confident in saying that he's going to be good. Like, he's one of those guys that, like, there's just no way he's not at least a role player in the NBA. But if they don't go with Donovan Clingan, or if they don't have the opportunity to select Donovan Clingan, I think if they stay at 5, I would be shocked if it wasn't Matas Buzelis. And people will make the Arn Tellem connection. And I guess that's not really fair because he's projected to go top 5, whether the Pistons are picking there or not. But I think the potential of Matas is about as good as you can get at 5 in this draft. And I think he fits, if he hits a ceiling, he fits exactly the type of wing the Pistons would need. And I've seen him be projected with like a ceiling of like a Franz Wagner. And I think if you put Franz Wagner right now next to Cade, that already, like, you change nothing else with this roster, that alone changes a whole lot in terms of the win and loss column, because Franz is someone who can play well on both ends of the floor and is a really elite level defender. Matas he's shown better potential when it comes to protecting the rim than being a perimeter defender so far. But if he can develop that perimeter defense and he can develop that shot back to where it was in high school, I think that's a perfect pick for the Pistons. But if he doesn't, then, that's really the swing. But I think he'd be a fun pick.
Yeah, Matas, he's the only prospect I've done an episode for so far. I don't know how many more prospect episodes I'm going to get in on the next 12 days, which is why I'm trying to have people come on and talk about the draft, because I don't know how much time I'm going to have to be able to dive into each prospect enough to give an episode. But nonetheless, I looked into Matas, and the shooting is such a swing set for me, and it's the strength. He has to get much stronger in the shooting. But if his shooting is there, if it's closer to what it was in high school, that changes a lot of things for what he is. So I certainly see the potential with Matas and see the ceiling. You just have to believe that his shooting's going to come through. If you don't believe his shooting's going to come through, I don't think you can make him the pick. But if his shooting, you believe in his shot, I completely understand the pick. And he has to get stronger. I think it's going to take him a little while to get stronger, but I understand the ceiling. Clingan, I think, is incredibly interesting because he does, from what I've read and what I've listened to people talk about with him, it sounds like he solves, like you said, literally all the issues the Pistons have with their center position. He solves those issues defensively. I've read and heard that it's not that he's very versatile defensively. You definitely will be playing a drop. You'll be a drop team with Clingan on the floor, but that's not a bad thing. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. One comparison I've seen people make to him eventually that they hope is eventually is like a Brook Lopez if he's able to extend his range out. But obviously that's looking way deep into the future, assuming that he can be a shooter, which is not something he's shown so far, even though I know the combine, it kind of, he started shooting threes and people were like, oh God, is he going to be shooting threes? But until he actually does that, I'm not going to believe it. But Clingan is definitely an interesting pick. I think that they pick him. I don't think it 100% means they're getting rid of Duren. But I think the immediate focus then goes to what are you doing with Duren? Like, I think that would be probably the immediate conversation right after that.
Yeah, I mean, it's inevitable, right? Like, I think they're going to have that discussion regardless because they're still linked to guys like Nick Claxton and Isaiah Hartenstein. And unless you want to keep rolling out the Duren Stewart lineup, I don't know how well it fits in terms of like how Trajan's really built his teams in the past. I don't really see him doing the too big thing too often. So if Stu stays, which I believe he will, he would project to be a center, whether he's starting or the backup center. I think he would be a center, and I think, in my personal opinion, he's better suited as a center because if you put him at the center position, he's able to guard centers, and you don't have to force him to. It's not that he can't shoot, but you don't have to force him to sit in the corner and not really be able to take full advantage of his size. Because Isaiah Stewart, my thing is called bully ball. He is the definition of bully ball. Like that's his game, right? He can shoot too, but it's not a thing where like he only has to shoot. You know what I mean? I'd like
you
to
don't
see
want him
all
shooting
of
like
his game.
7.5 attempts.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I want them to focus on other aspects of his game as well. And then one more thing on Matas, and this is something that doesn't have to do with on the court stuff. He just seems like a really good vibes guy. And I just feel like this team really could use good vibes.
Oh, he's what JJ Redick. I listen to JJ's podcast all the time, but he's what JJ would call an asshole. Like he is just like in a good way, like not a bad way, but a good way. Like he is a cocky asshole. Like it is what it is. That's what that like when the did you see that one of the Pistons accounts like tweeted out something like or posted on Instagram and was like,
oh no context Pistons.
And he liked it and laughed under it or said a comment or something. I was like, okay, the Pistons fans are gonna love that.
Yeah. No, I like he's super online and he seems like he has a good sense of humor. It has nothing to do with basketball. It's just something that like fans can get excited for. And I think overall vibes though is something that helps with the locker room, which does lead to a better overall team. And also you mentioned his size. I saw he did an interview with Kevin O'Connor recently. And I think he said he gained about like 15 pounds since the season ended. And from like the looks of it, it definitely seemed like he's been bulking up. So I think the size by summer league would be pretty noticeable.
And obviously after like 2 years of NBA strength and conditioning, it would get hopefully you'd assume even bigger and even better. And I do want to say one more time because I know this is going to get clipped. I'm being serious when I say that's a good thing. When I say he is like that is like the whole point of when JJ says that on the podcast is that's a good thing. It's a good compliment to have. So I mean that literally as a pure positive. I'm not joking.
It's all fun and games until that gets clipped on No Context Pistons and Matas sees it again.
Yeah, see, and I'm gonna have to go in the comments and let them know, Matas, look, it was literally positive.
Hey, big dog, my bad. I didn't mean it like that.
It literally is a good thing. I like it. So, like, all right. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap this one up?
Honestly, the draft is what 13 days, or day 2 of the draft is 13 days away. Day 1 of the draft is 12 days. I think I don't know how many people are aware it's 2 days this year.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you. I completely forgot that they changed it until just now.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be completely honest. It's because of Bronny. Right, like let's be real. Like they're not doing a second day of the draft on ESPN if Bronny James wasn't going in the second round. Anyways, I like Bronny. I got to say that I like Bronny as a prospect. I think he gets a little too much hate because he's LeBron's kid. Neither here nor there. I think after June 27th, the Detroit Pistons will be probably the most interesting team to watch in the offseason. Just because of how much movement I'm expecting, I can't see a team being more aggressive in upgrading than the Pistons. Whether that involves coaching or not, I think the roster will make a lot of improvement, and by default, the coaching has less pressure on them because the team will be a lot better. So that's something I'm really expecting, and I think is priority number 1 for Trajan going into this offseason. So it should be a very interesting couple of weeks for Pistons fans, and hopefully I'm back on here so we can talk more about it. But I appreciate you having me on, man, for real.
Oh, yeah, Czar's definitely going to be coming back onto the podcast. The last thing I have to say is, Trajan, I think you're going to do a great job with the Pistons. Hope you're going to do a great job with the Pistons. But like I said at the beginning, Tom, if you have to, step in. That's where I'll wrap it up at. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen every single day. Being available on all your podcast platforms. Hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. I'm Koo. That's Czar. Appreciate you guys. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Stay safe out there. Until next time. Peace out.
Peace.